Good morning. Welcome. We're glad that you've joined us today for the recording of the Family Meeting Podcast, episode 208.
Yeah.
Welcome. This week has been a very rough week for the Osterkamp family. It's been a rough one, hasn't it?
Yeah, I wish you could literally see the rest of our living room because there are clothes drying literally everywhere in this room right now.
Yes, our dryer broke down, and that was after the water heater had to be replaced and 2 tires on the car, an alignment, and other tires on another car, engine light on the other car.
Yeah. Along with like parenting issues and
emotional stuff,
personal stuff. It's been one of those weeks.
Yes. So I don't know. Maybe you're having the exact same kind of week. If you are, we love you. We're sorry. We're praying for you. Pray for us. We need each other. That's why we have Family Meeting Community, right? So we can be there for each other because some weeks are just harder than others.
Yeah.
And then when we have the wins and the victories, we celebrate that together too.
But we're still here. We're still, standing. We made it to our seats to spend some time with all of you.
Yes. Which we love to do.
We get to talk about our favorite topic today, discipline.
Not our favorite topic.
No parent likes to talk about discipline.
Favorite topic.
No normal, good parent loves discipline. No. But it's a necessary evil. That's the saying. But it is a good thing.
A necessary good thing.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So here we go. We are going to get this recording going.
Gather round, everybody. It's time for a family meeting. The Family Meeting is a show that's all about family relationships. We're the Osterkamps. I'm Thomas, and this is my wife, Lysandra. You want to laugh so bad. Lysandra. That's the new way I'm saying your name now.
It is absolutely not the new way you're saying my name. Hello and welcome to our family. Welcome to episode 208 of the Family Meeting Podcast. On today's episode, we're going to look at the why of discipline.
Okay.
Why is disciplining your child so important?
Go to Walmart and you will find out very quickly.
Well, and two, why is disciplining your child important to you? Like not in general, but to you personally, especially when they're young. It's really important when they're young, but why? So often we have the wrong why in discipline. And maybe, we have different things we're going to talk about, but really we want you to examine your why personally. And we're going to talk about our why. We're going to talk about some wrong whys.
Hopefully you have a why.
Yeah. Maybe you're not disciplining at all.
If your why is you got angry, that's the wrong why.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that. Before we do, though, we are just over a week away from our webinar, Guiding Your Kids Through Social Media.
I'm excited about this.
We've had some people sign up already. Looking forward to it. That is September 26th. So this is Wednesday the 18th. So just over a week away. That'll be at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. And here's the thing. The cost for the webinar is $19.99. But what we're doing for this specific webinar is we're giving you a discount code for all of our listeners. If you put in family meeting, all one word, it discounts it to $0. Okay. It's a $19.99 discount. So you can go for free and interact with us. We have some things we want to share with you. Basically a plan we want to help you to work through, figure out your own plan. But we also want to have some time just having a conversation with you, sharing the things that have worked for you, what your guidelines and your plan has been, answering any questions you might have. So it'll be more than just listening to a podcast or listening to a seminar or even a normal webinar. We want to have a conversation with you and invite you to give us your experience and your wisdom and help the other parents who are on board. So go to familymeeting.org/shop and you will see the webinar there. Make sure you put in the code FAMILYMEETING to get $19.99 off of the webinar.
Okay, sounds good. I can't wait. All right, so now we have to get into this ugly topic that none of us like as long as we're normal.
We don't have to. We get to.
We get to talk about discipline?
It's all about your attitude, no matter what you're doing. Your attitude.
Discipline is a tough one, you guys. And I know that a lot of you are in the throes of it right now. And discipline for us started when our children were crawling, really.
Yeah.
That was when it started, when they
When they could start to get into stuff they shouldn't get into.
Mm-hmm. And discipline is still happening today, 18 years later. However, I think the hardest season of discipline is when they're young, like toddler, early elementary, that era. Because maybe not for you as much, but for me, because I was home with them, and it was all day, every day, constant refereeing, implementing oh my gosh, I cannot think of the word. Implementing consequences for all kinds of behavior all day long. And it is exhausting. And I feel for those parents.
It's definitely exhausting, but I would say that the things that you're dealing with are a lot easier when they're very small, as far as the specific issues your kids are dealing with. Like, hey, don't go near the outlet, or don't put your hand near the stove, those sorts of things. Or you're teaching them about all the breakable stuff in the house, not to
or
touch
sharing them. And being kind to your sister or brother.
Because like for us, we didn't put all the breakable stuff away. We taught our kids to respect our stuff. So there was some extra discipline going along with teaching them all those sorts of things. But I would say that disciplining them now as they're getting older, teenagers, it's a little bit harder, just because of the stuff you're dealing with is a lot more complicated, I think, as you're helping them grow up and learn how to make their own decisions. So it's none of it's fun. Mm-hmm. And every season of your child's life, it's going to be challenging.
Absolutely. So we don't know exactly where you are right now, whether you are at that beginning stage when they're little and you're constantly having to correct all the behavior all the time and you are exhausted. I'm sorry. I feel for you, Mom. I feel for you, Dad. Maybe you are closer to our stage where you're helping your children navigate becoming young adults, and how much discipline should there be? How much freedom should there be? It's all very challenging. But either way, all of us should be disciplining our children, and all of us should know why we are.
Yeah.
It's really important to know the why behind discipline, and we talk about the why behind everything that we do. But today we're going to talk about specifically discipline. And there are good and bad reasons to discipline your children, just like there are right and wrong ways to discipline your children. And we have an episode very early on. In fact, I think it's a single-digit episode.
It's episode 3.
Episode 3. Wow.
It's one of our most talked about episodes. One of the episodes people say has been the most helpful for them.
Okay, good. So maybe you need to, finish up this episode, get your why figured out, and then head back over to episode number 3 and talk about the proper way to discipline, because that's what we talk about in episode 3. And honestly, what we're sharing there are things that other people taught us, and also things we learned through really
trial and error.
Really big mistakes and everything. So go ahead and listen to that. But today we're encouraging you really to start out with the why behind your discipline. And as we do that, we want to start off by looking at a rather lengthy passage in Hebrews 12:7 through 11. We are Christians, we are followers of Jesus, and we look to the Word of God to give us guidance on everything in our marriage, in our parenting, all of our family relationships. And there are so many principles in the Word of God to follow. And discipline is actually something that's really talked about quite a bit in the Word of God. So I'm going to read this passage, and then we're going to turn it to Thomas, who is our pastor, theologian, who is going to expound upon it for a little bit. And then we're going to get into some of the wrong whys and some of the right whys for discipline. So here's what Hebrews 12:7 through 11 says. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Beside this, we have had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them. But he disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. but later it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it.
And a great reminder, first of all, to Christians, that it is a good thing when God disciplines us. If we choose to go our own way and go against what God wants for our lives, disobey his commands, his rules, if we sin, it's a good thing that God disciplines us. The worst thing that could happen to us is for God to say, okay, just live however you want to live with the consequences and everything else. But one of the things I point out in this passage and similar passages, and that's simply because of the way we often have kind of relegated parenting to moms. Now, I believe in moms. They have a significant role to play. Probably the most important role to play in the nurturing and caring of our children. And that cannot be overstated. But I think in a lot of homes and a lot of families, dads have kind of taken a back seat and basically a non-participatory role where they sit back and the kids do whatever and they just let mom deal with them. That's not what we see in Scripture at all. Especially in the area of discipline. To my knowledge, and I've said this a few times and I've still had nobody show me, to my knowledge, nowhere in Scripture does it associate discipline in moms. It always talks about fathers. And this is one of those passages as well, where he speaks specifically to fathers and the role of discipline. And there's just something about that. Now, I want to say this, first of all, to single moms or moms who, you've got a husband that just isn't pulling his weight. I just want to say we appreciate you.
Right.
You are an excellent parent, and it's tough to basically be a single mom, whether you're a single mom or not, and raise kids and try to get them to act right and do right. Right. Keep on doing the best that you can. Yes. But for the homes with dads present, like, dad, fulfill your role. Yeah. Step up to the plate and make sure that your kids are learning right from wrong, making sure that they do learn that word that Lysandra had trouble with, consequences, that they learn to respect your wife, their mom. That is your role, and a very important role in the home. There is just something about a dad's demeanor when it comes to kids.
Yeah, and I think that most moms probably can relate to this. I will tell my kids something when they were younger, or even now as teenagers, and they would bargain with me and argue with me, and I'd no, this is what's happening. This is what you're going to do. This is what we are doing. But when dad steps in and dad says the exact same thing that I just said, everybody jumps into action. Nobody argues. Nobody rolls their eyes. Yeah. Nobody's bargaining. I'm like, how is this possible? I said the same thing. And I am following through with everything that I say. I'm following through with threats. I'm all this. But there's something about a dad in a home when it comes to discipline. And I'm guessing most of you can relate to that. I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule. But man, it can be frustrating as a mom, but it's also a blessing, because when dad steps in, then you feel like, oh, he's backing me up. So thank you, dads, for stepping in and helping your wives out with the discipline.
And so as he continues with the passage here, he does talk about what a good thing it is that God disciplines us. But notice in verse number 10, when it talks about, hey, we've had earthly fathers who disciplined us. Verse 9 talks about how we respected them. Like, I'm very thankful for the things that my parents did to discipline me, to not just turn me over to my own desires and whatever. I know I wouldn't be here where I am. I wouldn't have the family I have. And so I'm very thankful for that work in my life. But he says this in verse 10, for they disciplined us, talking about our earthly fathers, for a short time, notice this, as it seemed best to them. And this goes to, we're going to get into the whys, some bad whys, some good whys. I may spoil a couple of things that my wife wants us to talk about later on. But he talks about the fact that they did what they thought was best for them in disciplining us. And sometimes it is about, we're worried about what other people might think of us. And so we discipline our kids because of that, or our own pride, our own ego. There's a lot of different reasons, right? And so he says they did it what was best to them. And then it says this, but he, speaking of God, disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. And God's reason behind disciplining his children is so that we can become more like him, so that we can get rid of those things that are harmful, that will hurt us, and we can begin to have those things that will help us and grow and be blessed and live a life of righteousness. And so that is kind of the jumping off point with what we want to talk about today. Don't think of discipline as something I have to discipline. It's not fun. You shouldn't enjoy it, but you have to remember it is for the benefit of your child, for their well-being, for their future, for everything.
All right, as you search your heart today for why you discipline your children, we're going to share some wrong reasons that we discipline our kids. So we're going to start off with the negative, and we're going to try to end on a more positive note. Because, there's a lot of wrong reasons to discipline your kids, and there's a lot of right reasons, but we're going to start off with these wrong reasons. And I think as I went through these, I'm pretty sure that I could look back in moments in my parenting where I did and was guilty of all of these, like at one point or another. And so most likely, as we talk about these things, you're going to say, I disciplined because of that one time or many times or whatever. So don't let this destroy you.
Yeah.
There's always tomorrow. Like, we're talking about this so that we can get it right for the future. Okay. But this is just going to be a little bit of self-examination for all of us parents. And the first wrong reason to discipline your children is because of embarrassment. Yep. And this is maybe a big motivator for me when they were young. I wanted people to think I was a good mom.
Well, I think most parents do. Right? We go out and we want everybody to think we're the perfect parent.
Yeah.
And then when our kids do something to prove that we're not, and we feel that embarrassment, that can bring out the wrong kind of discipline.
That's right. So I know I've shared this before on the podcast, so forgive me if this is repetitive for you, but when my kids were little and we would go to the grocery store, I had 4 very small children. So at one point in the moment, the memory that I am remembering with this just overwhelming feeling of embarrassment was when Violet was a baby. So she was probably about 6 months. Abigail was like 2.5. Catherine or Isabella would have been 3, and Catherine 4. So we're talking about really, really small children. And I took them all to the grocery store. I chose not to use my time with Thomas, like to have him babysit for me, or watch his own kids, so that I could go to the grocery store alone, right? I wanted to have time with him later. So I always took the kids with me and put them all in the cart. And oh my goodness, my sweet, sweet child. She was so naughty. One of these children was so naughty every time we went to the grocery store. It wasn't that she threw a fit because she wanted things every time. It might have been that. It could be anything.
Literally anything.
It could be like the way her ponytail was. It could be the way that her shoe was buckled. It could be that she didn't get the seat she wanted in the cart.
Her cracker broke in half.
Yes. If the cracker broke before she ate it, it was a huge fit. So the fits were like unbearable, you guys. And I know some of you are like, yes, the fits. I am talking screaming at the top of her lungs, crying, kicking feet, waving hands, like hitting, just absolute screaming. And of course, I'm not going to discipline in the store because that's not a good idea. But I would have to finish my grocery shopping because it was so much work to get all those babies into that cart. So I'm not leaving. Like, I'm going to finish this grocery shopping. But man, I'm going up and down these aisles and people can hear us coming.
Everybody's looking like, what is going on over here?
They're aisles and aisles away and they can hear her screaming. And so when we come around the corner eventually, they're like, oh, that's the mom.
Who let this woman have 4 kids?
Exactly. And the looks, you guys have had these looks, right? Your kids are throwing a fit in public and people look at you like, most people look at you like, wow, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That kid is so bad. That mom does not know what she's doing. But then every once in a while you get that mom who looks at you with sympathy and is like, I've been there.
Yeah. Like, I feel you. Keep going. Yeah. It's all right.
So FYI moms, I always try to tell whatever mom I see now in the grocery store who's got the crying kid, like, hang in there, mom, you're doing great. Give her some word of encouragement. Give her a friendly smile, whatever you have to do to help that poor mom, because it is tough. But anyway, I know that there were many times in that season of my life that I disciplined my daughter out of embarrassment.
Yeah.
I was so embarrassed and I didn't want to be embarrassed again. I wanted to solve the problem so that the next time I went grocery shopping, I wasn't going to be embarrassed like that and I wasn't going to get those looks. And that's the wrong reason to discipline. And you know what? It can happen when they're in their teen years too.
Oh, yeah.
It is very important to me that my children are polite and well behaved in front of other people and that they, I want them to speak properly. I'm not like hoping for potty humor in a serious setting, right? Okay. Sometimes that's a challenge when you have teenagers.
I disagree, but whatever.
I know. That's also a challenge if dad is like, let's do potty humor all the time. But there have been many times when I have wanted to discipline my teenagers because I didn't want them to embarrass me. And so this can happen in multiple seasons of life, but understand that disciplining because of embarrassment is the wrong why. That is not the reason we should be disciplining our children.
Well, and that same daughter, you were out of town for whatever, did the same thing to me. I was going to the grocery store to get them something for supper that they would really enjoy, let them each pick out their own little thing, which rarely ever happened when mom was home. And so it was going to be this great thing, and all of a sudden we get into the store, and I don't even know what it was about. Never did find out. So she's screaming the whole time, and I did just what you did. Mm-hmm. Hey, we got to get it, right? We got to get it. And so screaming the whole time. And so I was embarrassed. And this led to the second wrong why also, because embarrassment can often lead to anger.
Yes.
And then you're disciplining out of anger. And I've told this story a number of times about Violet and the laptop when she was young. But here's the thing about anger, right? If we're disciplining in anger, we can and will provoke them to anger.
Yes.
So anger kind of breeds anger, and we're teaching them that anger is the way to deal with situations, which isn't the right way to handle anything. And so our example is kind of teaching them how to respond. And I think about Ephesians 6:4, and this is another one of those scriptures where it's very clear he's talking to fathers about the area of discipline. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. And so he's very clear about, hey, you shouldn't be provoking your children to anger. Like, that's not the right way to handle the situation. And so if I'm disciplining in anger, that's going to lead to anger. But instead, I need to learn the right way to bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So, and I tell people this all the time. If you're disciplining in anger, you are either abusing your children or you are going to abuse your children.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because in anger, you're not thinking clearly, and it can take just a moment, and you've crossed the line that you shouldn't cross, whether that's physically, verbally, emotionally. And so anger should never be a why for why we discipline.
Yeah, and I can remember times when they were young, because you deal with the same offense over and over and over when they're like toddlers, early elementary, middle school even.
And you just get tired of it.
You get so sick of it. You're just furious. You're just raging because it's the exact same thing you said 5 minutes ago, or you disciplined them 5 minutes ago for that very thing, and they're doing it again.
It's like, really?
Yeah, and you just get so angry. And when you are angry, that is not the reason, that should not be the reason that you're disciplining, right? So I'm so mad at you, I'm going to start swinging.
Yeah.
Like, that is absolutely not okay. Our next one is pride. And pride really does go along with embarrassment.
Sure.
But I think there's a little bit more to it than that. If you're disciplining just because you want that validation that you are a good parent, that you have everything under control, it is wrong. And I can remember a situation where one of my daughters was in about 4th or 5th grade, and we're a homeschool family, so that adds a lot of discipline into your home. When you add in, you're also now the teacher and everything. So there's a lot more discipline there. And one of my daughters had a real struggle with school and just hated it. And I remember a time when I was having like a girls' day with my sister and my kids, and we were going to have a great time, but we had a little trip to do. So I'm like, okay, everyone's going to do their reading in the car so that we can go to do this fun thing.
Yep, do a little schoolwork along the way.
Skip school, Yeah, so you're just going to do your reading in the car. It's not that big of a deal.
Shouldn't be that big of a deal.
Oh, it was a huge deal.
But when you're homeschooling, just about everything is a big deal.
Oh, it's terrible. So I'm driving in our minivan. All the kids are in the back, and my sister's in the car with us. And one of my daughters is like in 4th or 5th grade, so like 9 or 10 or whatever it was. And she's like screaming like a child, like a toddler, like screaming and throwing a fit. It's burning my ears. I know my sister is like trying to help. Like, how can I help? She's trying to calm her down. And I am just mortified. Even though I'm very close to my sister and everything, I just felt like, man, my pride was so wounded here. Because it really looked like I was completely out of control in my family. It looked like I didn't know what I was doing. And so I pulled the car over and I got her out and I disciplined her. And I know that I did it for the wrong reason. I did it because my pride was wounded. I looked like a really bad mom. I looked like, this child was way too old to be throwing this kind of fit. And so my pride was really wounded. And that was an example of the wrong why behind discipline. We have a lot of bad examples that we can give you.
Oh, yeah. And that's the thing is discipline should never be about you. Mm-hmm. Discipline should always be about what's best for your child. And when you add your own pride, your own ego into the equation, discipline has become about you and not about helping your children learn and grow and avoid danger and all those sorts of things. And so you have that pride involved. Another wrong why for discipline is revenge. Mm-hmm. You're like, man, that seems like a strong word against your own kid. Do that? But here's the thing, your child wrongs you, and so you want them to feel pain for that. Mm-hmm. Like that is the exact wrong why. And because of how much time you spend with your kids and because of how close you are, you build up that trust and everything else. And it's like we talk about with marriages as well. Like the more information you have, the closer you are to somebody, the more opportunity you have to hurt them and to hurt them very deeply. Mm-hmm. And so our kids, they know what's going to hurt you. When they say things like, I hate you, mm-hmm. like they know what they're doing when they say that. They know that's going to hurt you. When they talk about being a horrible parent or them, I wish I was never born into this family, like they know what they're saying. And they're saying things to specifically try to hurt you in that moment. And so what happens, we get hurt and then we want to take it out on them. Mm-hmm. And under the guise of discipline. Now, do I think they should be disciplined for that? Yes. But the revenge is not the reason we discipline them. Mm-hmm. We discipline them because you don't treat people that way. Like, and of course, not every wrongdoing or whatever deserves the same consequence as well either.
Right.
So, but if revenge is the motivation, like you did something to me and now you're going to feel pain for it, I'm going to get you back for it. That is definitely the wrong motivation for why you should be disciplining.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, under wrong whys for disciplining, we're going to look at unrealistic expectations of their behavior. This can be a really bad why. There are times that we get this idea in our mind that our kids should have the ability to do this, be this, act this way, control their emotions in this way, and they just don't have the ability to do it. And so we are disciplining based on our own unrealistic expectations. And depending on what their age they may or may not be able to perform at your expected level. And you have to understand that. So whether that is obedience or controlling emotions or, grade level ability and what kind of grades they get, or how diligent they can be in school, or how focused they have the ability to be at a task or a chore, you got to understand that don't just discipline them because you wanted them to do this thing and they cannot meet your expectation.
Yeah, you didn't get straight A's and so you're grounded,
Not every person in this world can get straight A's, no matter how hard they study. Like, that's just not in some children. And so really be examining your own expectations, because if you are disciplining based on unrealistic expectation, it is the wrong why.
All right, so that's some of the bad whys. Obviously, we could go on and on for a long time about that. But let's talk about the right motivations to discipline your children. And we have this one first for a reason, because it is the most important. Should be the most prominent. And we talk about this in episode 3 with our 5 C's of discipline. Mm-hmm. We use the word charity, but it's the word love.
Yes.
Love is the right motivation and should be the dominating motivation. Mm-hmm. I think of verses like Proverbs 13:24, where it says, "Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him." And the idea is, hey, if you withhold discipline when your child deserves it, I mean, that's not a loving thing to do. He uses the word, you have to hate them because of the direction that you're going to let them go in life and the consequences they're going to face. And going back to those verses in Hebrews 12 that we looked at, talks about the fact God disciplines the ones that he loves, just like your father loved you and disciplined you. And he says the same thing here in Proverbs 13. He who loves his child is diligent to discipline him. You're not just going to let them go their own way because you understand the direction that's going to take them. And so it ought to always be about the love of your child is why you discipline. And that comes out in everything. It comes out in the words you say while you're disciplining, the actions you're going to take, even the ramifications and the consequences you're going to put in place. All of those things should be about love. And if they're not, maybe you're angry in the moment and you've got to chill out until, hey, let the anger subside and I am able now to speak to my child in love and to discipline in love and mete out that discipline the way that it needs to be. But it's all love being the dominant motivating factor. Mm-hmm. Not you, not your hurt, not your pride, your embarrassment, or anything else. Love.
That's right. All of these other whys that we're going to share ultimately do stem out of love.
Yeah.
Like every other one, we're doing it why? Because we love them. Okay. So I'm going to share a story of our youngest, Violet Rose.
Okay.
So Violet Rose is almost 14 years old now. But when she was about 3 years old, she had maybe 3 or 4. Anyway, she had done this particular repeated offense several times. And I sat down with her and I said, Mommy has to discipline you now because you were naughty. And I've told you many times not to do this. And we've talked about it. And I'm disciplining you because I love you. If I didn't love you, I would not do this. I wouldn't care about your behavior. But I do love you and I want you to do what is right. And so that's why I am going to discipline you. So I go ahead and discipline her and she's crying, she's sobbing. And through her tears, she says, "Thank you, Mommy, for spanking me because I know you love me."
That's funny.
It was so cute. So Violet is my most grateful child. And so she was the only one of our children who thanked us for disciplining her.
Ever thanked us for discipline, yeah.
But she did more than once. She thanked us for disciplining because she knew she had the speech so many times from the time she was teeny tiny that we only discipline because we love you. That's why we're disciplining you. And so make sure that you have that love as the heart of your discipline. And next, teaching is ultimately the reason for discipline. It's teaching them all the different kinds of things that they need to learn and understand. It is very unfortunate in our lives that we do not learn it in easy ways. Most of the times we have to learn by hard consequences. And that's hard. That's hard to watch your children go through because you wish so badly that they could just learn it when things are smooth and doing great. But usually we have to go through like the school of hard knocks in order to learn things. And one of the greatest motivations for your discipline should be teaching your children and teaching them how to behave, teaching them how to speak, teaching them how to obey, teaching them what not to do, what to do. All of these are teaching opportunities. So that's one of the big motivators that is a good motivator.
Another one is ensuring their safety, right? That's a good motivating factor of why behind discipline. And we mentioned earlier about, especially like toddlers, when we're talking about specific things around teaching them, there's things around the house that can hurt you. If you reach up and try to touch the stove while mommy or daddy's cooking, like you could get burned. If you're sticking your finger or something else in the outlet, you could get shocked. Like we're teaching them and that, hey, you could get hurt here. So a discipline behind that is, hey, we want to make sure you keep them safe. And there's a lot of different areas where we have an opportunity to discipline to ensure safety, whether that's taking phones away.
Yeah, there's a lot of dangers on our phones. And your kids' phones.
Just this past week in my message at church, one of the questions I asked to our church people was, have you made a mistake as a parent? Mm-hmm. No, every parent raised their hand, and they should. But then I specifically said, hey, I'm not going to force you, but if you want to share your parenting mistake to help all of us feel better, I want to give you an opportunity to do that. And of course, different people shared a lot of different things. But one mom talked about phones and just letting her daughter have her phone in her room at night. And if she could go back, she would change that because there are a lot of dangers that are associated with that. Of course, social media and all that. We're getting ready to have this webinar on helping your children and how to use social media and developing a good, safe plan for them to be involved in social media. I think it's one of our responsibilities as a parent because social media is not going anywhere, but there's a lot of dangers involved with social media. So things like curfew. And what if they break curfew? Well, curfew's there to ensure their safety. After a certain time at night, not a lot of good things happen.
That's right.
Maybe it's keeping away from friends. They've got certain friends that are just leading them the wrong way, going to lead them towards doing things that could hurt them, hurt their future. So we may have to keep them away from certain friends or grounding them from dangerous places. I always thought this was interesting. People who ground their kids from going to like youth group or church activities. Yeah. It's like it's really where you want them to be, but
ground them from somewhere else, not from somewhere where they are going to get good godly friends or good godly advice and scripture.
No, you obviously as a parent, you do you, but I never understood that. Like we want to have as much positive influence as they can. And yes, youth group is fun. And you're like, I'm grounding them from all fun. Well, okay. Like I said, you do you, but we wanted to make sure our kids had that constant good influence. But grounding them from dangerous places or you're not allowed to go to this certain place because of what goes on there most of the time or the reputation the place has. Well, I'm not doing anything. You're not allowed to go to certain parties because of where it's held and what happens at the party. Oh, I'm not drinking. Well, if it's happening, underage drinking's happening, like bad things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And so, ensuring their safety is a very good reason to be disciplining your kids.
Teaching them respect for others. Respect is a really great motivator for disciplining. You want them to understand respect for authority, within reason. Of course, we're not talking about blindly following all authority every time. We are talking about respecting positions of authority and respecting people who they can trust. We're talking about respecting other people's rights. And, I think about brother and sisters, right? I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. They get so close because they know they're not allowed to touch. They're not allowed to like poke or pinch or hit or whatever, but they can get so close, right? And we're teaching them people's space. It's respect for other people's space. Ultimately, when you're doing that, you're trying to teach them respect for other people's property. And Thomas talked about how we didn't move our breakable things. We taught them to respect our things, and you don't touch this thing.
Well, and it was important for us to do that because a lot of what we do is we going into other people's homes. And we can't expect when we go over to somebody's home for them to put all their stuff because we have our little toddlers coming over. Like, it was important for us to teach our kids that you need to respect other people's properties, other people's home, other people's stuff.
That's right. That's right. And, I think about all the people we've had in our home over the years. We've had a lot of people over in our home. And we had some either parents who did not teach their children respect or children who just wouldn't receive the instruction. But we had a lot of damage to our property having children in our home, like severe damage.
Over the years, yeah.
Over the years. And these children just did not understand how to treat someone else's home. And so that was important for us to instill in our children. And then that goes right into when they're an adult and they borrow their neighbor's tool. How are you going to treat that tool that you borrowed? Like we've had to borrow our neighbor's car when our car was in the shop. Okay, we're going to put gas in that car. Like, how do you treat other people's property, and having respect for the people, for the property, for people's rights, for people's space, and all of those aspects of respect are a very good reason to discipline your children.
Another great reason is developing emotional control. And I think this is an important one. Mm-hmm. Our kids discover their emotions at a very young age, but they have no idea what to do with those emotions. And I just want to say and kind of point this out. For some, it's very obvious. For some, they need to hear this. Our emotions are given to us by God, and they are good. But we can act out in ways because of our emotions that is not good. And our kids, especially when they're young, or even when they're teenagers and they're going through puberty and all that, and their emotions and everything's changing, there's a lot going on inside of them. So a lot of times those emotions come out, and I don't have sons, but we've often heard from boy moms that, sons can be just as emotional as well with the crying and all the stuff. So
hormones and all that.
They often just let their emotions flow, and then they just act however they feel based upon those emotions.
And we all know that's really dangerous. You cannot just act however you feel.
No, and that's one of the things we've tried to make sure that our children understand is no matter how you're feeling, it doesn't give you an excuse to treat somebody poorly. Mm-hmm. Like, we always need to treat people, like Lysandra talked about just a second ago, with respect, whoever they are, and to treat them lovingly and to treat them well, even if our emotions, we're having a hard time. Mm-hmm. And our discipline, though, trains them how to handle their emotions and help them to control their emotions rather than emotions controlling them. And this goes back to what we talked about with anger as well. Like, if you're disciplining in anger, you cannot teach your child how to develop emotional control because you don't have it yet. All right, we'll pause right here. Sorry, someone's at the door for our YouTubers.
Oh, honey, it's the dryer. Hey, hi. Do you want to swing it right here? Oh, thank you so much, guys. No, just right here is perfect. Thanks. Have a great day, guys.
So we talked about all the clothes laying all over the place because our dryer's not working. We had somebody giving us a free dryer, and they literally just dropped it off right now. So.
I'm so sorry. And they didn't tell when they were coming, so we could not organize that around. We had no idea. It was a big surprise. Sorry about that, but thank the Lord. Where were we?
We're jumping right back in. So here's the thing. If you haven't learned how to control your own emotions, then it is impossible for you, and it is an unrealistic expectation for you to expect your child is going to know how to control their emotions. A toddler will bite in anger when another child steals his toy. Mm-hmm. Right? A small child will throw herself on the ground when she can't have a second cookie. Sometimes it's not a small child who does that. Sometimes it's a mom who does that, or a dad. A child will lash out in retaliation at a sibling when they hurt their feelings. All of these times, we need to step in and discipline for the purpose of helping them to control their emotions the next time anger, discontentment, or hurt feelings come again.
That's right. And then that is going to help them so much in their future adulthood. And that kind of leads into our last good why behind disciplining. And that is we discipline to raise children who will be good adults.
Yeah.
We want to raise children who will be hard-working adults.
Well, and as we talk about often on the podcast, we're trying to raise adults who can impact this world, who can make a difference, who can change the world for the better. And without proper discipline, that's never going to happen.
That's right. That's right. But we want these children, well, and really we need to stop thinking that we're raising children, we're raising adults.
Right.
That's what we're raising. We're raising adults. And we want the adults that we produce to be kind. We want these adults that we produce to be a good representation of Jesus, to be good citizens in our communities, to be good parents and spouses themselves, who will be well-rounded, law-abiding individuals in our society. And all of that comes back to love for your child. We love them and we want them to have a good, positive life. And all of that's going to happen because of the discipline that we give them, as long as our why is right. If all of our discipline comes out of anger, that's going to produce resentment in our children, and it's going to make them want to rebel against our discipline.
Yeah.
If all of our anger comes because they can tell that we're just embarrassed by them or our pride is hurt, they're not going to respect that. They're not going to adhere to that discipline. And so when we discipline in love for our children, they can accept the discipline. And we've seen it in our home. We really have. Where when we discipline the right way with the right motives, they accept it. They accept that discipline and they work to change their behavior or their attitude.
Well, and the thing is, if the why behind your discipline isn't right, then you're going to get the exact opposite outcome from that discipline than what you're hoping for.
Right.
So you've got to take some time to make sure your why is right. And obviously, as flawed human beings, there's going to be times where we just discipline and we use the wrong why. And it happens. It still happens. You know, we've been at this. We've got 4 kids, 18 years. We don't have everything down perfect. There's still situations that come up where we're like, I just need some help to make sure that I handle this right. We had a situation recently where it was just like, okay, I need some time to make sure that I don't say something I shouldn't and I handle it well. But you've got to get the why figured out. And that's the family meeting conversation I want you to have. First of all, I want you to have it as a spouse. Just talk about how do you feel about the why of our discipline? Why? What's the predominant why that's been showing up lately in our discipline? And just have an honest conversation with each other. How do you feel I've been doing as far as discipline is concerned? Do you feel like I'm doing it for the right reason? Or is embarrassment a motivating factor? Is it pride? Is it anger? Some of these other things that we talked about. Or are we truly doing it out of love with all the other things in mind that we've talked about, kids' safety and guiding and teaching them and all those sorts of things. And then you're having conversations with your kids, because if if your why's been wrong, then you need to own that and say, you know what, I haven't always disciplined the way that I should have, and just owning that, apologizing that, and then working to move forward like we talk about so often. So not a fun conversation to have family meeting wise, but a vitally important conversation to have as you seek to raise adults who can go out and make an impact in this world.
Thanks for joining us, friends. Today, please go and subscribe to the Family Meeting Podcast from your favorite podcast provider. And if you found this information helpful, please share this episode on social media and invite your friends and family to listen in with you.
To find more content and information Lysandra and I provide, you can go to our website, familymeeting.org, or email us at info@familymeeting.org. If you'd like to shoot us a text or call us, you can send a voice message at 904-257-3062.
And we want to invite you to join us next week for our next family meeting as we look at 10 things a wife should regularly say to her husband and 10 things a husband should regularly say to his wife.
Okay. That might be a long episode. That's 20 things.
We'll go through fast.
Okay. Thanks for joining us today for this family meeting. Have a great week, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
Sorry about that, you guys. That doorbell was as much of a surprise to us as it was to you.
I will say that's probably a first, though.
Yeah, I think that's the first time.
208 episodes, and I think that's the first time somebody's rang the doorbell to interrupt us while we're recording.
I feel like that's very, very good.
Yeah. 1 out of 208, that's pretty good odds.
We'll take it.
And that's the thing. If you're watching on YouTube, you just watch the recording and you see whatever happens, like me pulling out my phone to try to get her phone to
stop
noise. Sending notifications.
Yeah. It's you get let into the real life of the Osterkamps.
Well, typically before we start, one of my first questions is your phone off? Because her phone is beeping constantly.
Well, it's not beeping, it's vibrating.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Notifications, though, constantly. Text, emails, social media. Hers goes off a lot more than mine does.
You got to try to make some friends, baby.
Not a lot of people trying to reach me. So
everybody important in your life is in this room.
Exactly.
Anyway, thanks for joining us today, having this conversation about discipline. Maybe there is a wrong motivator that we didn't think of. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
Maybe you've got one where you're like, hey, what about this for the right reason to discipline? We want to hear that. So put those in the comments so that we can interact with you. We want to hear what you have to say. And don't forget to sign up for the webinar coming up. It's not that far away. So get signed up there and you can get your free ticket by entering family meeting as the discount code. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week.